Most people think wealth has a certain look. They expect tailored suits, luxury watches, sports cars parked in front of glass houses. So when someone drives an old pickup truck and wears faded work jackets from the hardware store, people make assumptions automatically. That mistake has entertained me for years. My name is Arthur Bennett. I'm 68 years old. I live outside Columbus, Ohio, in a quiet brick house with a cracked driveway and a vegetable garden my neighbors pretend not to judge. And for the last 27 years, I've owned Bennett Industrial Freight, one of the largest logistics and manufacturing companies in the Midwest. Most people have never heard of it. That's intentional. I've never enjoyed attention. Attention attracts people who care about the wrong things. Money changes how strangers look at you, sometimes how family looks at you too. So years ago, after the company became successful, I made a decision. I stopped talking about it. No interviews, no magazine features, no giant public image. Meanwhile, the business kept growing quietly. Warehouses, transportation contracts, manufacturing facilities. By the time I turned 65, the company employed nearly 4,000 people across 11 states. And I still bought my jeans from the same farm supply store I'd used since the 90s. My daughter Emma says I look like a retired mechanic who accidentally wandered into executive meetings. She's not entirely wrong. Emma is 33 years old, smart, funny, stubborn enough to argue with traffic lights. She inherited her mother's smile and my tendency to hold grudges longer than necessary. Unfortunately, she also inherited terrible taste in men, at least for a while. Then she met Nathan Cole. The first time she brought him home, I knew within 10 minutes he was different from the others. Not because he was flashy. Actually, the opposite. Nathan was polished in a quieter way. Expensive haircut, perfect posture, calm confidence. The kind of man who could walk into a room full of executives and somehow make everybody feel slightly less organized than him. He shook my hand firmly and smiled. Emma says, "You don't impress easily." "She talks too much," I replied. He laughed. Good sign. Nervous men usually overreact to silence. Nathan didn't. That night during dinner, he talked about corporate finance, operational restructuring, and market expansion strategies while helping Emma set the table like he'd done it 100 times before. I watched him carefully. People reveal themselves most in small moments. The way they treat waiters, the way they react to interruptions, whether they listen or simply wait to speak. Nathan listened. That caught my attention. After dessert, Emma pulled me aside while Nathan loaded dishes into the dishwasher. "Well?" she asked. "Well, what? What do you think of him?" I glanced toward the kitchen. Nathan was rinsing plates while pretending not to listen. "He's either very genuine," I said quietly, "or very practiced." Emma rolled her eyes. "You know, not every man is secretly plotting something." "I worked in business for 40 years, I replied. "Most people are plotting something." She laughed. But the truth was, I liked him. That made me cautious. The dangerous people are rarely obvious. Over the next year, Nathan became part of the family naturally. Holiday dinners, Sunday barbecues, movie nights. He remembered birthdays, fixed things around Emma's apartment without being asked. Once drove 3 hours through a snowstorm to help me after my truck battery died outside Dayton. That one surprised me. Most people offer sympathy. Nathan showed up with jumper cables. Eventually, Emma told me they were serious, very serious. And around that same time, something interesting happened at my company. Our previous CEO announced retirement. Now, normally the board handled executive hiring, but I still controlled final approval. We interviewed candidates for nearly 2 months. Top business schools, massive resumes, executive experience from major corporations, and honestly, most of them felt artificial. Then one evening during dinner at Emma's apartment, Nathan casually mentioned frustration with his current firm. "They care more about appearances than results," he said. That sentence stayed with me. A week later, I made a phone call, then another, and shortly afterward, Nathan Cole received an invitation from an executive search firm asking whether he'd consider interviewing for a leadership position. Everything was legitimate. He earned every promotion afterward, but I opened the door. Nathan never knew that. Neither did Emma. 3 months later, Nathan became the new CEO of Bennett Industrial Freight. Watching him walk into the company headquarters for the first time was one of the strangest moments of my life, because he had absolutely no idea who owned the company. Technically, my name appeared in legal filings and corporate records, but most executives never looked that deeply. I operated quietly through holding groups and private ownership structures. The board knew, senior legal teams knew, a handful of executives knew. Nathan did not. At first I considered telling him. Then curiosity stopped me. I wanted to know who he really was when he believed I was just Emma's aging father with an old truck and a tomato garden. Turns out, he worked harder than anyone expected. Nathan modernized supply systems, renegotiated shipping contracts, and fixed operational problems previous executives ignored for years. Within 12 months, profits increased dramatically. Even the board members who initially doubted him started praising his leadership. Part of me respected him deeply for that. Another part found it irritating that Emma had apparently chosen better than I did at her age. Then came the dinner, and everything changed. It started with a phone call on a Thursday afternoon. Nathan sounded unusually careful. "My parents are in town this weekend," he said. "They wanted to have dinner with you." Something in his tone immediately bothered me. Not fear exactly, more like tension. "How badly do they want this dinner?" I asked. A pause. "That obvious?" "Yes." He exhaled quietly. "They've heard a lot about you." That answer explained absolutely nothing. Still, I agreed. At my age, instincts become impossible to ignore. And my instincts were screaming. The restaurant was downtown Chicago. One of those expensive places where the menus don't show prices because apparently rich people enjoy financial jump scares. Okay. Nathan met me outside wearing a dark navy suit tailored so perfectly it looked painted onto him. He glanced at my old brown work jacket. To his credit, he didn't comment. "You could have dressed up a little," he joked carefully. "I ironed the jacket," I said. "That's effort." He laughed, but not fully. Something was definitely wrong. Inside, his parents were already seated. Richard and Diane Cole. Richard stood immediately when I approached. Tall man, silver hair, the kind of smile wealthy people practice in mirrors. And within 30 seconds, I knew this dinner had nothing to do with family introductions. People planning something always act too prepared, too polite, too controlled. Richard shook my hand using both of his. That kind of handshake usually means one of two things. Either someone genuinely likes you, or they're about to lie professionally. Dinner began normally enough. Wine, small talk, travel stories. But Nathan barely spoke. Every time I looked at him, he avoided eye contact a little too quickly. Then 40 minutes into dinner, Richard reached into his jacket pocket and removed a thick cream-colored envelope. He placed it carefully on the table between us, and suddenly, the entire evening made sense. "Arthur," he said calmly, "there are some things regarding the past we think deserve clarification." Nathan stared down at his glass. That bothered me more than the envelope itself. I picked up my water slowly. "Before I open this," I said quietly, "you should understand something about me." Richard smiled politely. "I'm listening." "I never sit down at a table I haven't already investigated." His smile weakened slightly. "Good." I opened the envelope. The first document hit me immediately, a familiar name, Michael Grayson. I hadn't heard that name in nearly 30 years. Back in 1991, Michael Grayson and I started a small transportation business together outside Cincinnati. Tiny operation, 2 trucks, 1 warehouse, no money, just ambition and terrible coffee. For 3 years, we worked side by side building that company from nothing. And for 3 years, Michael quietly stole from me. Not dramatically, Smart thieves never steal dramatically. He skimmed money carefully, small amounts, enough to avoid attention, until eventually I discovered he'd been secretly building a competing operation using our company funds. Just ambition and terrible coffee. For 3 years we worked side by side building that company from nothing. And for 3 years Michael quietly stole from me. Not dramatically. Smart thieves never steal dramatically. He skimmed money carefully, small amounts, enough to avoid attention, until eventually I discovered he'd been secretly building a competing operation using our company funds. Same suppliers, same customers, same shipping routes. Everything financed using relationships I created. I spent months collecting evidence before confronting him. Then I gave him 2 choices: leave quietly or explain fraud charges in court. He disappeared. I rebuilt alone, and over time, that tiny business became Bennett Industrial Freight. What I never knew back then was that Michael Grayson had a cousin, Richard Cole. A cousin who apparently spent decades believing Michael's version of the story. Richard folded his hands calmly. Michael died believing you destroyed his life. I nodded once. I'm sorry he believed that. Richard's eyes hardened. He kept records. So did I. That surprised him. I reached into my own jacket pocket and placed a smaller envelope beside his. Inside were original bank records, signed statements from Michael's accountant, and legal documentation proving exactly what happened. I watched Richard's confidence begin collapsing piece by piece. People imagine power as loud. Usually it's quiet. Nathan finally looked up, and for the first time all evening, I realized something important. He didn't know the full story. Not really. How much did you know? I asked him directly. Nathan hesitated. My father told me there was history between the families, he admitted. He said staying close might create opportunities. There it was. Not revenge exactly. Manipulation. Richard had used his own son like a business strategy, and judging by Nathan's expression, the table, he was realizing that in real time. We're all family now, she said softly. Surely this can stay peaceful. I looked at her hand, then at Richard, then finally back at Nathan, and suddenly I got tired. Tired of games. Tired of hidden motives. Tired of people assuming quiet means weak. Nathan, I said calmly, there's something you should know. He straightened slightly. The executive search firm that recruited you? I hired them. Silence. The board that interviewed you? Now confusion spread across his face. They report to me. Another silence. I leaned back slowly. The company you spent the last 16 months running? Nobody moved. Richard actually blinked twice like his brain needed extra time to process the sentence. Nathan looked genuinely stunned. You own Bennett Industrial Freight? He asked quietly. Entirely. The poor waiter chose that exact moment to approach the table. Would anyone like dessert this evening? All 4 of us turned toward him simultaneously. He immediately sensed danger. I can come back later, he said quickly. Smart decision, I told him. He disappeared. Nathan rubbed both hands over his face. I don't understand, he admitted. And honestly, that was the first honest sentence anyone had spoken all night. Because you loved my daughter, I answered simply. And because if someone was going to help lead what I spent my life building, I wanted to know exactly who they were before trusting them with it. Richard scoffed. So this entire thing was some kind of test? No, I replied calmly. This was parenting. Big difference. Nathan sat quietly for several seconds, then slowly turned toward his father. How long did you know? Richard adjusted his cufflinks. A nervous habit. I suspected after hearing the company name. You knew before Emma and I got engaged? No answer, which was answer enough. Something changed in Nathan's face right then. Real disappointment has weight to it. I trusted you, he said quietly. Richard immediately shifted defensive. Everything I did was for this family. Nathan shook his head slowly. No, he said. You did it because you couldn't let go of a 30-year-old grudge. Silence settled over the table again. And honestly, that was the exact moment I started respecting him completely. Character reveals itself fastest when loyalty and integrity collide. Most people choose loyalty. Nathan chose truth. Eventually, he looked back toward me. I owe you an apology. No, I said honestly. You owe Emma honesty. That matters more. He nodded slowly. Then I added, but Monday morning, you and I are having a very real conversation about the future of the company. No secrets this time. For the first time all evening, he smiled slightly. You're still going to wear those old jackets to meetings, aren't you? The jackets stay, I said firmly. That's non-negotiable. He laughed. A real laugh this time. Not the polished executive version, just relief. Richard and Diane left shortly afterward. Defeated people usually leave quietly. No dramatic speeches. No threats. Just wounded pride and uncomfortable silence. After they left, Nathan leaned back heavily in his chair. I can't believe Emma never told me. She didn't know, I replied. That surprised him. You never told your own daughter? I wanted at least one person in my life who looked at me without calculating net worth. Nathan stared at me for a moment, then nodded slowly. Fair enough. A few minutes later, the waiter cautiously returned. Dessert? He asked carefully. Nathan looked at me. I shrugged. Might as well finish the disaster properly. We ordered chocolate cake. Excellent decision. On the drive home that night, I thought about Michael Grayson, about resentment, about how bitterness spreads through families if nobody finally chooses to stop carrying it. By the time I reached home, the kitchen light was on. Emma had apparently stopped by earlier and forgotten to turn it off again. I smiled. Some habits never change. My phone buzzed. A text from Nathan. Emma says your jackets are embarrassing. I laughed quietly and typed back. The jackets built her inheritance. 3 dots appeared immediately. Then, fair point. I sat in my old pickup truck for another minute staring at my small brick house. Most people assume success changes everything. Sometimes it shouldn't. I built my company to protect the people I loved, not impress strangers. And that night, sitting in the driveway with my phone glowing in the dark, I realized something important. Nathan finally understood that too, which meant maybe, just maybe, my daughter had chosen the right man after all.